Thank you. Okay, good morning. Welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. It's Thursday, the 1st of February. We'll start with item number 1, please, which is the minutes from our last meeting. That wasn't too long ago, so hopefully you can all remember back on the 18th of January. Thank you to the team for getting those out. Are members happy that they're a true and accurate record, please? Agreed. Yep, agreed. Thank you very much. Item 2, apologies and substitutes. I'm aware of at least one apology. Ruth?
Thank you, Chairman. I received apologies from Councillor Samantha Taylor. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Item 3, Chairman's announcements, if any. I do not have any. Item 4, urgent business. There is none. Item 5, declaration of interest. Does anybody have any interest that they wish to declare, please? None. Thank you very much. Item 6, non-members wishing to address the meeting. Welcome. I think, Gordon, you're the only one. Keen as ever. Thank you for coming. Moving on to item 7. Very pleased to welcome Councillor Phil Cowan, Cabinet Member for Finance, Revenues and Benefits. As usual, we'll have an overview of Phil's portfolio. It is the that and the budget are the main 2 items on the agenda today. So very pleased to have you here today, Phil, and going to hand over to you. Oh, got an echo.
There, Chairman. And another echo. Are we ready? This is... Yes. Let's go again and again. How about that? No. Well, nothing like making an entrance, Chairman, is there? So I'm sorry you're only hearing me for the first time and only time now, I think. But to crack on, good morning, everyone, at long last. First of all, I'm going to do a little introduction as an overview to the portfolio. And then alongside me, you'll see we've got our 151 officer and also head of ARP who starts in March, and we'll introduce them in a short while. So the Finance, Revenues and Benefits portfolio embraces a range of functions within the authority, as I'm sure you're aware. Preparing budget estimates, monitoring the budget and reporting to Council at quarterly intervals, being responsible for a key element of the budget process, namely the delivery of the Evolve programme, ensuring any cash reserves are deposited to secure optimum returns relative to the Council's need to draw on designated reserves to manage our day-to-day business, ensuring that our overall financial management complies with SIPFA good practice guidelines, establishing robust capital and revenue accounts to enable the Council's programmes and policies to be undertaken properly, and working with ARP to provide the revenues and benefits function of the Council. All that said, there's one overarching aim, and that's being to ensure that the authority can afford to deliver the statutory services it is legally required to provide, and any discretionary services that Council has deemed are appropriate within its corporate plan. In order to achieve these aims, we start by understanding our income and expenditure, and whilst we're all to a large extent responsible for both of these elements, there are many instances where we are not in control of either, and it is these grey areas that have the potential to frustrate the best laid plans when budgets are prepared and agreed. Thus, for example, when new government policies are introduced, but the new burden's funding is insufficient to meet the cost of implementing the policy, or when the demand for temporary housing is in excess of our estimates, we face increased costs that must be financed from our own resources. Similarly, when external events cause a drop in fee income, such as is being experienced in the planning department as a direct result of the impact of national policy, such as that relating to nutrient neutrality, our income levels can drop beyond what may have been anticipated, and the team must find ways by which the books can be balanced. There has been significant debate in the press of late about the parlous state of government finance and the number of authorities that have either been forced to issue a Section 114 notice or who are perilously close to doing so. In our case at Breckland, I'm pleased to be able to report that we are not in that position, as the draft budget papers show. We are proposing a balanced budget now and in the medium term. However, I can make no apology for ensuring that where we're able to recover costs of providing services, such as the various licensing functions, for example, that the fees that we charge reflect accurately the true cost of providing the service in question. Finally, unlike the private sector, where it's possible to mix and match revenue and capital costs, as a local authority, we are prevented from doing so, and thus cash held in reserve is earmarked for specific programmes and/or projects, and they are defined in the draft budget papers. We're not permitted to use capital to fund service provision. We can use it to fund capital projects, and any income received by way of rent, for example, can be ploughed back into the revenue account that does fund core and discretionary services. I'm pleased to inform members that the team with me today consists of Alison Chubbuck, on my left, Assistant Director Finance and Section 151 Officer, and next to her, Lorraine King, the newly appointed head of Anglia Revenue's Partnership, who takes up her role in March. That said, many of you will be aware that Lorraine is already an employee and working in Anglia Revenue's benefits. And we're here to make this presentation to the Overview and Scrutiny Commission in accordance with Agenda Item 6 and the request from the Chairman to discuss with members the Finance, Revenues and Benefits portfolio and answer any questions you may raise. Are we okay, Ruth, at the moment? The reason I asked that question is we have a brief presentation which will look at both ARP and the corporate budget proposals that we're proposing. Are you ready?
How is that now? Working. Excellent. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you, Ruth. I think it's skipped on. That's perfect. So this presentation is to provide an update on where things are and a flavour of what's coming up for you all, and opportunity to ask questions as we go on. we can move on. Thank you, Ruth. So this is what the portfolio covers, which has already been covered in that introductory speech. So we'll move straight on to look at a bit more detail. Thank you. So the budgets are on the agenda separately, so we're not going to discuss those in great detail here, as it's an agenda item on its own. But we do have a balanced budget if our savings are achieved, which is a really strong position for a council to be in at the moment. We've been asked a few times about how our settlement compares to the estimated budget that we put in. And now we use advisors to help us estimate the settlement before it comes in, and they help us model our business rates income as well, so that our estimates have been fairly close to what was announced in the draft settlement last month. Oh no, December, sorry. We're in February now.
Yeah, different month.
In December.
Yes.
The main difference this year was a surprise around the services grant, which was reduced nationally, but the impact of Breckland was very small, so our estimates were fairly close this year. It's a real team effort at Breckland. We don't have silos. Everybody really pulls together to create the budget and minimise our costs. And that's a sort of mindset that we have through our whole staff here. We do have a good financial management, we report it regularly, and that has allowed us to weather the storms in the short term. For example, the inflationary pressures this year, the COVID pandemic, so we are in a good position on that. The Treasury Management Policy is another key thing that's coming up at the moment. It goes to Governance and Audit Committee on the 8th of February and then comes to full council at your next meeting. This sets out all of our capital spend, how it's financed, where we can invest our cash to ensure security of that cash, and sets out some indicators which we have to report for each year. We also produce the accounts every year, another really key finance function. Obviously talked too long. A really good history of meeting that deadline. This year the work has already started. We're valuing our assets now so that we can meet those deadlines. We've put borrowing on here because in 2022 we first reached our borrowing position for many years. We aren't borrowing externally at the moment, but we do have to pay for all our new capital spend through revenue for the life of that asset. And that's included in this draft revenue budget. And if there is anything in our capital programme purely for financial yield, then new restrictions mean that we can't borrow at all. So that's something new which has come in recently. Thanks, Ruth. So since the budget was set, we continue working on the Evolve programme, and there's been various questions about what that really includes. So there's a little bit more detail here for you. This is just the programme for next year. It's worth saying as well that we have delivered, since 2016, around 400,000 of savings every year. So we've got a pretty good track record, but it becomes more difficult each year. So these are the main areas. So income are areas such as our trade waste, the new leisure centre that we're refurbishing and building in Attleborough. We continue to work on automation all of the time to try and streamline our processes both for the customer and for ourselves. We're looking at contracts as soon as they come up for renewal. So the big one in there this year, as you know, is when the planning and building control contract ends. The decision has been made to bring that back in-house. We're always seeking external funding, so the main ones in there are our partnerships that we have, as well as sort of our regeneration team, bringing in new areas of funding, and looking at our Inspiring Communities programme to make sure that we offer a package of funding to various areas. And finally for me, just to look at audit, not the most exciting, I realise, but we're part of a really well-established consortium in Norfolk. It's Breckland, Broadland, South Norfolk, Norwich, Yarmouth and North Norfolk, so it covers a lot of us, and we do some joint working with King's Lynn. We report regularly on that to Governance and Audit Committee, and we're on track this year to deliver the full internal audit plan by the end of the year. And then next year's plan is coming to the next Governance and Audit meeting for approval. In addition to that, we have an internal performance board which measures audit actions and can check in with managers if anything is off track and any good results. External audit is a little bit difficult at the moment. Nationally, at the end of December, only 45 out of 467 authorities had their 22-23 accounts audited. Plus, on top of that, there's 350 odd other older audits still outstanding. So that's almost 800 audits still outstanding for previous years. And we're coming to the end of the current year, so that's only going to grow. Breckland are in a really good position compared to many others. Our only audit outstanding at the moment is 22-23, and we're the only Norfolk authority in that position. Because of those delays, some authorities haven't even been able to produce accounts for the last couple of years because they haven't got a balance to start with. So that is a concern, and nationally government are looking at that, and there's a consultation out at the moment to try and reduce that backlog. And I will stop there and hand over to Lorraine for her slides.
Thank you. Hello everyone. Nice to see you all. I'm just going to talk to you today about the main areas that we're focusing on at Anglia Revenues Partnership. It's obviously quite a large partnership of 5 councils, and we cover the whole of revenues and benefits for those councils, so a very large area. So I'm going to pick out a few really key things that we're focusing on at the moment. So the first one of those is annual billing. So we're preparing for our biggest part of the year, which is billing for council tax and business rates. Supporting vulnerable customers and those who are experiencing financial hardship, really key at the moment with cost of living. Monitoring and managing the increasing costs of temporary accommodation. I think that's a real key current hot topic across the council. Planning for the managed migration of housing benefit cases, which will start taking place during 24-25. And seeking ongoing efficiencies and opportunities for growth, of course. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, start looking at the first 2 topics. Annual billing. The biggest event of the year for us, of course. So, testing's underway to prepare us for that, and we're looking to issue around 65,000 council tax bills, 9,000 benefit notifications, and almost 5,000 business rates bills across Breckland alone. And of course, we have 5 councils to do that for. So it is the biggest event of our year, of course. And new for 24-25, we're introducing the option to receive your bill for council tax or business rates as a PDF email attachment. So we're quite excited about this. It's going to simplify the process for a lot of people, and it's going to avoid customers having to log into an online account, remembering login details and passwords to view their latest bill. Once that's all in place, we plan a real big sort of take-up campaign next year to try and encourage people to opt for that email PDF. We're also reducing costs by using tighter timelines this year, and that will enable us to send our bills out using Economy Post. And we'll still hit that 10-day deadline required before the first payment is due when we send the bills out. So it's the first year we'll have done that. And to get into the best position we can possibly ahead of annual billing, we've held an ARP-wide focus day. That took place on the 23rd of January. It was a real good day, really pulled everyone together, all focusing on getting us up to date, concentrating on moves, getting discounts in place to ensure that them 24-25 bills are as accurate as possible when they do go out. And over 4,000 processes were completed. That's 4,000 moves, benefit notifications, discounts on one day across ARP. So it was a huge success. Wider joined up support. So we're really keen to look at ways to work better together and working with other departments and agencies to support customers and find ways to provide more joined up multi-agency support. Two examples of this are we've just joined up and set up an ARP-wide housing teams working group. So previously we met with housing teams individually across the partnership. We've pulled them all together. We're going to be sharing ideas, sharing experiences and aligning our processes where we can. The first meeting took place on 4th of January and it was a real success. And our collaboration with the Breckland Communities team, where we're working together to pool expertise there as well. So we're working together to try and identify vulnerable cases as early as possible and refer them to the appropriate support networks. And this approach is actually being piloted by Breckland before we consider rolling it out to our other partners. Next slide, please. Next hot topic is temporary accommodation. So you may have heard in the autumn statement the LHA rates, that's local housing allowance rates, will be unfrozen for the first time in several years for 24-25. It's great news for those who are in general needs accommodation. It means they will get more help towards their housing costs. So it's really welcomed. But on the flip side of that, the subsidy that we receive from the DWP for those in temporary accommodation has not been uprated. So that's still based on January 2011 rates. So this means there's a significant shortfall in the money we receive back from government to fund that help with housing costs for those in temporary accommodation. So we've been working specifically with Breckland to lobby government for a change in these subsidy regulations to bring them more up to date. And we've also been working with the Local Government Association and DWP steering group so we can feed into a more sort of collective approach sort of nationally as well. Universal credit, definitely a hot topic. Migration plans for 24-25 include those who are in receipt of housing benefit. So it's really going to affect us in revenues and benefits this year. So we're carefully monitoring and forecasting what the expected effects of that will be. And we're also working really closely with DWP and other stakeholders to make sure that we're able to fully support customers who are on that journey and to support them through that transition. And last slide, thank you. So last two topics, we've got automation. An area that we really do push forward in, so we're continuing to do that, and we've got many automation projects underway at the moment. We really do lead the way in this area, and we take part in a lot of pilots. We support other local authorities, we're early adopters, and we really do have a lot of success here. And our recent successes include automation of direct debits over the web. So we're automating about 50% of those now. And we're now working on automation of refunds. We're also hoping to expand the moves automation. We've been working really closely with our software provider to improve that functionality. And we're looking to implement an automated arrangement manager during 24-25 as well. And then lastly, of course, we continue to seek out opportunities for growth. Late last year, we started to provide fraud services for Breckland and South Norfolk, already providing the enforcement services for them. And we've also secured continued funding from Norfolk County Council to help fund further recovery work. And then we're in talks with other local authorities around further provision of fraud services as well. So a lot going on in that area as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with ARP, this was an initiative that was commenced many years ago between Breckland and Forest Heath District Council. To the extent that we are now, and Lorraine will correct me if I'm wrong here, the third largest provider, if you like, of benefits in the country. which puts little old Breckland, a rural district council, into an incredibly strong position when it comes to try and influence government and policy at a national level. And as a result of that, our team at ARP are frequently advising ministers and advisors in Westminster on various aspects. And I suspect that the fact that some of the lobbying we've been doing on housing costs, for instance, is beginning to bear fruit. When you think back to my introduction, where I was talking about pressures that are outside of our control, temporary accommodation is one of those, and we've all seen that over the last few months, to say the least. And you can understand now, when we look at the fixed cost for temporary accommodation is now 12 years out of date. And of course, a lot of the problems that people are facing who have a requirement for temporary accommodation is because their landlords have decided they can no longer afford to maintain a house with the rental income they have, given the cost of mortgages, for example. So when you look at that balance, it's completely out of kilter with the reality of life. One of the, I suppose, the most significant changes that we're trying to introduce through the partnership is to make the partnership far more efficient at doing what it does using technology. Now, we've heard an awful lot over the last few weeks about AI and the benefits and disbenefits of that. But there are significant opportunities to be able to use that technology to great effect in ARP. And that's been recognised by some of the other authorities with whom we now work and provide services that they can't provide at an affordable rate. And I think that's to the credit of the whole team at ARP, that they're able to demonstrate they can work far more efficiently than the authority's own members of staff. And significantly, we've seen and are continuing to see rises in postal rates, and that's why it's very important that the team that Lorraine's heading up is looking at changing the way billing is carried out so that we can cut a huge cost out of that business of sending paper through the post. Notwithstanding that, the Economy Post will allow us to reduce those costs, but the more we can avoid sending paper through the mail, which may or may not arrive at its destination in time, is to be applauded. So I would thank Lorraine. She has a large task ahead of her, but I think having met, I suppose, all of the team down at ARP from the various authorities, as I do sitting on the joint committee, we have a dedicated team in Thetford who are going to work for the benefit of all our residents across all our partner authorities. Thank you, Chairman.
Lovely. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Alison. Thank you, Lorraine, and congratulations on your new role. If we limit questions, folks, to the portfolio update and save questions on the budget to the next item, and take them in two parts, but any questions for the Cabinet member on the portfolio, please? Yes, Harry.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your presentation, and congratulations to Lorraine on your appointment. I was interested in the remarks, particularly also of Alison Chubb, about not working in silos, and I know that Lorraine referred to the work that you're planning to do around linking up with the communities, identifying vulnerable residents. I think not necessarily for today's meeting, but I think I and probably other members are interested in seeing how that's going to be working out. I know that in part of the Inspiring Communities going forward, there'll be things looking at debt management and all sorts of other things so that people don't fall beneath the cracks. But obviously, applaud what you're doing so far. And I'm sure from my perspective, I'm sure any additional lobbying that we can help in the year to colleagues will be doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. Any further questions or comments, folks? Gordon?
Thank you. Yeah, it is just a simple question really about the automation or sending PDF accounts to people. And sometimes quite a fuss is made about putting things on the electronic system. How will people actually get onto that? Will you Will you make a decision? Will you offer it out? Will you look for volunteers? How are you actually getting people on to having their bills entirely by PDF and not by paper?
Okay, so we already offer e-billing, but at the moment it's an option where you have to log into an account to view your bill. So all of those people who've signed up for that will move over to receiving a PDF attachment. All of our correspondence that goes out asks people if they'd like to tick a box and sign up to have their bills electronically. That on our online forms, that is actually automated, so if they tick that box, it automatically sets them up. We'll also be looking to run a campaign once we're up and running with the PDF attachments through all of the customer service teams across the partnership to encourage take-up. So when we've got someone on the telephone, we'll be asking them if they'd like to sign up at that point. And we're actually looking into other options about whether actually we have an opt-out or rather than an opt-in in some circumstances as well. So yeah, there's lots going on. So, but that is our next step, sort of to look at all of those options and run some campaigns.
Thank you, Gordon. Robert, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The PDF for council tax bill often asked for council tax as a proof of where you live, etc. Will a print off of that still satisfy the banks, etc.?
Yes, that will satisfy that. That is your actual bill. So if it's a PDF copy, as soon as it's printed, it's the same version as you would receive in other way.
Okay, thank you. Question from me, seeing as nobody else has indicated. We've heard a lot from housing associations over the last few months, and there was some criticism about the size that they have grown, and they've become quite enormous. Some housing associations covering all over East Anglia, and you mentioned, Phil, about the early days when it was Breckland and one or two others. How big is too big for ARP? At what point do we sort of compromise on quality of service and get too big? How do we ensure that we're continuing to provide what we should be providing?
I don't think we know what too big is. I think we're in some ways we could be at the optimum size, but in other ways, we have to look at opportunities, consider all opportunities that are out there, and there are opportunities to bring partners in for fraud services, for enforcement services or other standalone services, as well as sort of considering a full partner as well. But yeah, I think consider every opportunity that comes along and see where we go with that, whether it stacks up.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Lorraine's quite right. The joint committee, which is a committee which consists of partner members, essentially, is currently debating just that very topic, because ARP, as I explained, is now a significant operator in this field in the country, and questions are asked as to should we grow it, should we keep it the same size, or how else should we use the service and skill set that we've built up. Now, speaking very personally, I think we're probably at an optimum size given our location as well. Because the partner authorities are effectively an East Anglian group of members, and Thetford and the various satellite offices in the various authorities sort of works very well together. My own view is that we should be doing more of what we are doing, which is drawing down business from other authorities who are struggling in certain areas of their statutory duties and providing those services, because we have that skill set in the office right now. We have the ability to work electronically and digitally. I mean, that's now been proven over the last few years that sort of system works. So all I can suggest, Terry, to you as the chairman and members here, is that the joint committee, which monitors and manages the whole process, is constantly reviewing the opportunities, and the opportunities vary. And we ask the officers within ARP to look at those opportunities and report to us. And as soon as there are any changes, then clearly we'll be able to have a meaningful discussion and with each of the authorities themselves. But of course, whenever we come to look at change, it's not Breckland that institutes the change. It has to be an agreement across all of the partner authorities in order to achieve it. So to reassure everyone, we don't stand still. We do move forward. We do provide those services. Those services themselves are able to underpin some of the cost of providing the services for the partner authorities, because when a member of staff is doing a particular task, it's pretty straightforward to be able to roll that out across another authority. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I do read the ARP committee minutes, and I know you've been having those conversations, hence my question, but I know you are focused on ensuring that the quality remains as you grow, because it's recorded in the record of your meetings. Bedtime reading, I don't know if anyone else reads them, but I do. The other question I wanted to ask was for Lorraine, and increasingly residents that present to me in real hardship, there's various sort of scales, but those that are in real sort of desperate situation are normally those that turn up with a court summons for their council tax. And nearly always I find that those people actually should have been getting single person discount local council tax support. What procedures do you have in place to actually prompt people to make sure that they're accessing that support that they are legally entitled to but are perhaps unaware?
Yeah, we do a lot in that area, and we're all constantly looking at what more we can do in that area as well, because we want to capture people at the earliest stage, make sure that we are maximising sort of entitlement to benefits, discounts and other benefits through DWP as well. So we do a lot of that in our communications. We're using a company called Tel Solutions, which does a triple touch a text, call, and email, early soft reminder for people who are falling behind. We've found that does prompt people to pay, and it does reduce the amount of hard reminders that we are actually sending out, but also it gives us the opportunity to remind people to contact us. You know, if you're experiencing difficulty, we can put in their links to claiming council tax support or other discounts. So we're using things like that, and we're looking at further ways that we can further use things like Tel Solutions to prompt people to claim discounts rather than just remind them that they need to pay. So we're looking at things like people who on universal credit, because their income changes monthly, they can dip in and out of council tax support. And we're trying to capture those people that dip out by sort of identifying people who've not had any council tax support for 3 or 4 months. We'll send a text or a reminder, just, you know, have your circumstances changed? Would you like to contact us? We may be able to help. So we are looking at a lot of ways that we can pick up on people who may be entitled to that sort of help.
Brilliant, I'm really pleased to hear that, thank you. No further questions? Thank you, Lorena. You don't need to stay for the next section, but you're welcome to. Sorry, Gordon, did I miss you?
You did indeed.
Sorry, you have to wave at me.
That's all right. I don't belong to your committee, so I deserve to be missed sometimes. It was just a comment, really, about the question you made about the size of the organisation and what's too big. I don't think there is a too big, in fact. I mean, I accept that there might be a too big for the current team or the current systems or the current office. But like many people in the last few days, I've had to deal with inland revenue online and entirely in that way. I've had to tax my car again online. I've dealt with a multinational insurance company to insure the damn thing. And I say that because it's gone up an awful lot this year, as you'll all find out when it comes round. But all of those organisations are very much bigger, are in a way similar, in how they deal with people, and they all work very efficiently. So there's no reason why a nationally effective Anglia Revenues partnership shouldn't equally be effective, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. Okay, we're going to move on to item 8 then, which is the draft budget, medium-term plan and capital strategy. And back to yourself, Phil.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Lorraine, for that. You've got some substantial papers in front of you, as usual, I'm afraid, at this time of the year. Many appendices. I hope we've managed to get the appendices right with in terms of suffixes and such like. So it'll come as no surprise that I'm not going to present the papers to you at this stage in detail. They are there for you to have read. And for those who are a bit longer in the tooth than others, they'll all be very familiar in terms of the content and the order in which they're presented. I suppose if we go right to the very front of the agenda item, there is a recommendation there which you as members will either choose to recommend or not based on any questions and responses that we can give you. What I really want to say is I'm actually very pleased to be here today presenting this draft budget. For all the reasons that we've been talking about over the last few minutes, it's not the best of times, to be certain, to be looking at finances in local government. There are enormous pressures coming left, right and centre at us, some of which we can anticipate, others of which we are blissfully unaware. And of course, I suppose the latest world events in the Red Sea will eventually play out somehow in our financial position as a country, and no doubt here in East Anglia and Breckland as well. But we can't second guess that at the moment. What I can say is that we have before us today a balanced budget for the coming year and for the medium term. And yes, there are still some challenges, as you can see when you look at the Evolve programme, that we still have to find some relatively, and I stress that, relatively small amounts in order to keep the budgets balanced going ahead. You know, they are not in the hundreds and hundreds of thousands. They are very manageable, and you will have heard as well some of the things that we're doing in terms of automation and making our operations slicker and more efficient. Will always go a long way to achieving that. The other thing that this draft budget delivers for our residents and businesses in Breckland is a continuation of all of the statutory duties that we're charged with providing, in addition to which those that we've identified as what we often call discretionary services through the corporate plan that we all sign up to, we're able to maintain and deliver those as well, whilst, as we have seen around the country, others are struggling to provide even their core services. So on that basis, I'm absolutely delighted to be able to come to you today to present this draft budget and medium-term financial strategy, which will deliver everything that we want it to deliver, that I believe our residents would expect us to deliver, and we can support our businesses, which is absolutely vital to the welfare of residents and the successful, thriving community that we like here in Breckland. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any questions, please? Harry?
Thank you very much, Philip, and thank you to Alison and the finance team for your hard work, which I know isn't yet complete on this particular budget. I've got, first of all, a sort of comment stroke observation which is intended to be constructive. I note from full council that we own, in terms of the public responding to the website, I think we only had one person reply. Now, obviously, we've done everything we should be doing in terms of putting the information out there and the timescale and so forth, giving appropriate time to respond. I think for the public looking at that, I'm not suggesting that the response is any different from last year's or you've done something differently, but and it maybe depends on what feedback councillors have, but I think if you were doing something which was, if you like, showing a bit more the sort of thing like you put out once the council tax comes out with like a pie chart saying these are our sort of discretionary services, statutory services, this is where we're getting our sources of income from and how we're arriving at that, that might then have identified a few more things. And often sometimes people talk about some of the programmes that we've got in the corporate plan and look for different titles, you know, like inspiring communities, etc. What does that actually mean? If you look at the portfolio holders' responsibilities, you can say, oh yes, that means bins, that means Attleborough, and so on and so forth. So that might have elicited a different response, and it may also help members trying to be constructive going forward. I did note you say this year is particularly challenging. I look back at the same paper in February 23, you won't be surprised at my diligence, is that it is much more challenging than we had last year. If we look at the 23, 24, 26, 27, in February 23, you talked about the Evolve programme again, alternative housing, intervention for housing, solar panels, etc., and in particular removing reliance on the new homes bonus funding, which obviously does play a part. So I've got a short number of questions. Was that this isn't obviously quite the final reiteration, because you've still got obviously the saving stuff to identify or publish. So one question is, are you going to be describing any more broad brush or detail around the Evolve programme and the projects at all? That's one question. The second question is obviously that it's going to be more difficult as we go along. Although you're achieving the balanced budget up from now up to 27-28, that's assuming we're having to make savings of 965k this year to get the balanced budget or contribute a large part, and then 1.65 million recurring. If we hadn't got those savings, obviously we might be in more uncomfortable territory at least. So that's one question. We've mentioned the strain of other partners, and because we obviously have got a partnership approach to things like health and wellbeing strategy and so forth, how far, if some of those partners aren't getting the benefits that they should be getting, you know, the shortfall in the funding going forward, which is only a 1 year, how far we're going to be expected to take up the slack or have, you know, additional pressure. You did refer also at the start of your presentation in terms of the areas which are statutory and discretionary, and I think obviously it's always useful, I think, to have that distinction between those things that we have to do and those things that we like to do. And in fact, borrowing a phrase from the excellent sort of round table and discussions we had many years ago by former leader William Nunn, when we had a could we, should you in actual debates with the council, things are going to get a little bit more serious later on. So, for example, if people talk about establishment or efficiencies, that means sometimes may mean people, you know, and some hard decisions. You've mentioned projects in progress, have a list on that, and also I think it'd be useful going forward, it doesn't have to be for today, is how far we're utilising our reserves and growth fund to compensate for some of the areas with our, you know, different shortfalls, accepting that you're going to still keep that at 2.5 million, you know, as our sort of benchmark positions. Those are just my sort of initial observations, Phil. Thank you.
Someone else reads the papers, Terry. This is very good. Thank you. No, seriously, thank you, Harry. It's good to know that we don't just write all this stuff down just for the benefit of our own pens, frankly. So you've asked a number of questions there, some of which are quite detailed, and between us, I'm sure we'll be able to give you a fairly detailed response. So reserves, let's start with reserves. As you rightly say, we have a general fund which sits at around about 2.5 million minimum, and you'll see from the papers that we're actually sitting above our minimum deliberately because we know, for instance, that there will be some shortfalls in our requirements when things like the waste bill hits us. We're not quite sure precisely how much, but we'd be wrong not to actually put some money into reserve to cover some of those unknowns. The other reserves are actually earmarked reserves, and they're very clearly defined in the documentation, the purposes for which they are maintained. And as we sit here today, and I can only say as we sit here today, those funds that are identified and looking ahead for the next 3 or 4 years are what we expect to be able to use for the purposes that are identified. You mentioned efficiencies. Efficiencies isn't just about people and numbers of staff. Quite the opposite, actually. It's all about how we do things and how the same number of staff can often do certain things in a different way more efficiently themselves. And that's, I suppose, that harks back to some of the points we made about ARP and how we're able to roll out some of those services that ARP provide to other authorities using the staff that we have. Because whilst if you took, and this is just a sort of hypothetical example, but if you took, let's provide service X to council Y, you'd say we need so many people. But you actually don't if you've got a core cadre of people with those skill sets, because they're able to use their own skill sets to actually minimise the impact. So instead of having maybe 10 people, you only need to recruit another 5, for example. Those are totally hypothetical examples, but it's that principle which applies to how our staff function. And another aspect, and this is something which is very difficult to quantify, it's all about morale, frankly. And if you have an organisation where morale is high, where the workforce is happy, you get better outputs from people than if they're not. And we only have to look at our own organisation to see that since we've undertaken the major changes as a result of, largely, to be fair, a programme that was put in place long before the pandemic, but the pandemic changed the way we worked, it changed the way people saw each other, understood how things could be done, and right now I can honestly say that I think this authority is an authority where people are significantly happier than many others, and I think that's credit to everyone involved. You mentioned our partners with whom we work they might be other authorities, they might be agencies of various kinds, it could be the NHS, it could be anyone, the clinical commissioning groups. I can't answer for them, Harry, I really can't. All I can say is that we do what we can to work alongside them using the skills that we have in this building and the officer corps that we have, who've built up relationships to work very closely with those other agencies. And that's working very well at the moment. And I can't believe it would be any different as we look ahead, because it's about people again, and it's about the way people function. You also mentioned Evolve and the Evolve programme. So as I look at the papers in front of us, we've identified, for instance, in 24-25 that we've still got 103,000 to find. Next year, 25-26, it's 418, then 383, and so on. All I can say is that we are finding that money, and we're finding it in different ways. We're either getting additional income in by doing things that we haven't done before, or we're doing things fundamentally differently than we have done before. And I think all of those aspects will work together to be able to deliver those savings. And before I come to Alison, I'm glad you went back to 23, because I remember writing that. And I wrote the 22 as well. And in 22, we were coming off the back of the pandemic, which was fundamentally different. And we heard a politician of some stature yesterday talking about how they wish they hadn't been in a place they were in when the pandemic hit. Frankly, I found it very difficult working remotely, trying to organise a finance portfolio with a budget where we were able to show incredible results, and that was down to the staff that we have working for us. It was only going to get worse before it got better, and as I said in my introduction, there are many things that affect our budgets, and as I look ahead, I am I have an element of trepidation, let's put it that way, about world events and how they may or may not play out and affect us here in Breckland. But what I can say is that the team we have here are doing their damnedest to make sure that everything that we do for the benefit of residents and businesses is to better their environment. So, Alison, would you like to just talk about Evolve in any detail or not? Oh, before you do, she's got a sheet here which has got lots of red on it. And the reason it's got lots of red on it... Oh, we've gone off. Maybe that was deliberate, I don't know. You're right that when we come to full council, I would expect that we will have had the final settlement. We haven't yet got the final settlement, as we talked at council the other day. Alison.
Yeah, so on Evolve, now that we've identified the whole programme for next year, we can actually add some more detail to that. In the draft budget, it's more difficult because we're still working through the different options. But they are the areas that I sort of highlighted in the presentation around income from trade waste, the leisure, the partners funding, those types of areas. So yes, we'll have that.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to move on to Robert next, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Page 31, you've got a high impact, low likelihood risk on renewable energy and NDR income, and you have a mitigation of responding to consultations. When was the last consultation and what was the outcome? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, there hasn't been a consultation on this since the retained NNDR came in, which was a good number of years ago. I can't remember the exact year, sorry. So this is just a risk which is not, there's no indication that it will happen, but if it did, there would be a high impact of it. So no consultations currently.
So I mean, what is that worth to us? And we keep seeing in planning further solar farms going through. Are we still getting all the income from that? And I understand that we might not get the income from Neptune.
Yes, we currently get circa £3 million from renewable energy business rates alone. At the moment, that includes Neptune, but you're absolutely right. We receive the income where we're the planning authority, and for the new expansion of Neptune, we weren't the planning authority on that.
Okay, thank you. Roger next, please.
Thank you. Can I specifically ask questions around councillor allowances? Could you, if you're not able to do it now, I'd appreciate a written response to this, but are you able to direct me to somewhere in the budget where I can find what we've allowed by way of councillor allowances for the forthcoming year in comparison to what they currently are? I'm assuming that we know that though we haven't seen it yet, we know the independent remuneration panel has met and they have submitted a report to this council, which councillors have yet to see it, but has account been taken of its content? And if it has, how are we funding any increase? Thank you.
So thanks, Roger. You're quite right. I haven't seen anything from the remuneration panel at all, but I can tell you that if you recall, I can't remember the year. Someone may well remember that as councillors, it was determined that we would link any allowance increase to staff increases as well. And as far as I'm aware, but Alison can give us some more detail if she has it, the allowance for council expenses is, I think, 2% that we built into the budget, because that's what the staff increases are based on. And they're probably shown on that large spreadsheet, which has on line 1, and I'll never find it quickly, council expenses, isn't it?
You're absolutely right. It is the 2% assumption in the assumptions table there, but there is actually no detail within this report on exactly that total cost. But I can send that to you separately from my budget book.
Yeah, it's in.
Sorry.
No, sorry, Roger. Can I just... It's you'll see it on Appendix B. It's the first line which says employee-related expenses, and that's where it would all hide.
Just follow up on that. So, to be clear, we've allowed a 2% increase in the budget for this year. Have we made any allowance for any backdating of allowance increases for this year?
No, the budget is set at the start of the year and it's set, so any change that comes through as a result of that will, if it's different to the assumptions, will require funding. It will depend. When we see the report and understand any financial implications, then there would be a pro forma with that report suggesting where any funding would come from.
May I ask a separate question? Thank you, Chairman. As we all know, the Household Support Fund is coming to an end at the end of March, and at the moment there isn't any additional government funding that's coming. I'm concerned from the amount of referrals that I'm having to do as a ward representative that there is significant need out there. And as we all know, national events and in the press this week, you can be on a very large salary of about £118,000 a year and still be struggling. And maybe we need to do a referral for our MP. But that aside, is there any scope in this budget for us as a council to put some kind of fund in or look at where our resources are currently targeted to put together our own support fund? It may not be to the same level of payments that we make at the moment, but I'm concerned as a ward representative that without this fund, you're losing a very helpful tool for people who are in need. And I know from experience, by getting that referral, that allows me as a ward member to draw down funds from other sources, whether that be other authorities or charities, etc., to try and help those individuals and those families in need. But the key driver is that fund. I'm asking this question because I'm concerned about the Norfolk County Council scheme, because bizarrely I'm getting social services, children's social services contacting me directly saying our own Norfolk Assistance Scheme can't help. Can you, or do you know of any charities locally that can help, councillor? Which I think is bizarre. So the Breckland thing is key. What can we do as an authority with the resources that we have to put something in place, Phil?
Well, before Alison answers, I can't answer. We can't answer for Norfolk County Council, I'm afraid, can we? And it's kind of disappointing, I suppose, but not unsurprising, given some of the stuff that's been in the press.
Yes, that's absolutely right. The communities team do have regular meetings with Norfolk County Council to keep up to date with any changes or developments that might happen. And we do still operate our early intervention fund through the communities team, which is our own Breckland fund, so is not funded through Norfolk County Council.
Okay, thank you. Terry, please.
Thanks, Chair. You've rather stolen my thunder on that one, Roger.
You want to have a whip round for the MP as well?
Yeah. Well, let's. Oh dear. I'm a big fan of the podcast The Rest is Politics, which features Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart. And despite him being a Conservative, I agree with Rory on his contention that the best way of supporting people in deprived areas is with cash injections. And in that respect, I've spent a lot of time, as you're all aware, working, volunteering in a community shop, where as well as selling affordable goods as a supermarket, we're also a bit of a clearing house for people who are struggling, and I regularly give out fuel bank vouchers, food bank vouchers, and of course the household support fund. I see at first hand very immediately how much help that is done, and I very much regret its passing. It's really allowed people to carry on contributing to the local economy in a way that I'm really quite scared we're going to miss. So I would echo Roger's question and speak up for the household support fund.
And I don't disagree with anything anyone's saying on this particular topic. Regrettably, it's not in our gift. The household support fund never has been. And all I can urge is that maybe one or two MPs ought to be lobbied to try and ensure that central government does just that and puts it back in place. But you've got a waiver at the end here who's trying to attract your attention, Chairman.
You always look to the left. You always look to the centre.
Okay. You're too slow, Fabian. They're much quicker on this side of the room. Oh, yeah. Thank you for that. I'm going to take them in order that I've got them, just to be fair to everybody. I've got David next, please.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, congratulations, I think, are due to the team for producing, in the current circumstances, a balanced budget. Secondly, my apologies, because my electronic system has failed me, so this may be in one of the appendixes that you refer to. The question I have basically is, in order to get to that balanced budget, have we had to include any, and I quote, efficiencies and evolve ideas that were in the briefings, the budget briefings in November, December, which included, and I quote, car parking charges, CCTV options, dog wardens, and Swaffham dual-use investment, etc., etc. Have we had to go down that road in order to actually get our balanced budget? Thank you.
There's nothing in the budget about car parking. There's nothing in the budget about CCTV. I can't recall dog warden. To be honest, there's nothing in there on that either. And Swaffham dual use.
No, there's nothing in the revenue budgets, but there is still the capital allowance
The
for the yeah.
Thank you, David. Fabian, it's your moment. I hope it's good.
I forgot what it is now. Just trying to get it. Now, just like a bit. You're very confident about a significant increase in business rates going forward for the next few years. So I'd just like an explanation on that, please, because in some of it, it's over 40%.
Yeah, business rates is fundamental to this council, as you know. And you will also have seen, if like Harry, you read back copies of my papers, that there's always been a risk attached to business rates, because what's effectively known as the business rates reset that's been threatened for the last few years, which still hasn't happened. We're not anticipating that rates reset will occur anytime soon, for the simple fact that there will be a general election shortly, at some time during the course of the year probably, and as a result that tends to have an effect of pushing onto the back burner such policies like that. Alison mentioned in her sort of skip through those slides that we don't just stick a wet finger in the air and have a think. We do take advice on business rates as well as other aspects of putting our budget together. So, Alison, do you want to just explain why the business rate take is still as high as we anticipate?
Yeah, thank you. It is increased by inflation each year, and even if the government don't put the multiplier up by inflation, they compensate councils. So our business rates income is led by inflation, hence the big rise for next financial year. It's based on the inflation level at September, which is still high. And then it jumps up again in the future year, and that is offset by less income in the NNDR Section 31 grants, which is where the government recompenses for discounts such as retail, hospitality and leisure. So at the moment, that is only shown for another 1 year. We don't know how long that will continue. So those two lines are best taken together to get a full picture.
Okay, thank you. Peter, next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I do read. I'm not an avid reader like one or two people in the room. And I've probably found the answer here, actually. The preset settings by the town and parish councils, has that all come in yet? And would that impact on the budget? Or have you allowed enough? Or what have you allowed for their increases? Because obviously they're setting them and you don't know what they want and what they're going to ask for. And before I close as well, that I can recommend to members that early prevention funding in Breckland is still available. Officers are still on the ball, and I've actually put 2 people forward this last couple of months and catch them in that early stage before they are in desperate need. So that is out there, that funding.
Thanks for that comment, Peter, on the early intervention funding. I think precepts are all just about there, aren't they?
Yes, we've got a few who are experiencing difficulties with clerks at the moment. So there's a couple still outstanding, but they will all come forward in the full council tax setting meeting when we've got them all in on the 22nd.
22nd of February, this month, actually. Yes. 3 weeks' time, Peter.
Okay, thank you for that one. William, next, please.
2 relatively simple questions, I think. One, on the papers, there's the tax base is listed, and I know when I read that sometimes I think that's the level of council tax these poor parishes are charging, but I don't think it is that, because my own parish looks like it's charging £200, and I'm pretty sure they're not. I hope they're not. And the second one was on the list of central items that finance looks under. I'm just going to link it. I was doing a piece of peer work for the LGA yesterday, and one of our neighbouring authorities was going through their mobile phone contracts, and by linking into fixed-term contracts, they've knocked out 100 grand from their relatively small district finance budget. So I just wondered, are we looking at our phone bills and our ability to use different devices? I know, again, I have a Breckland mobile device, and I think I've just had an email, probably as everyone else has, saying, do I want another one? But if we could just change our policy so that you can stick it on here, which I know is possible because the county council does it. I don't need a county council device because they allow me to use my own. That must save a huge amount of money for this authority in terms of duplication of devices and indeed contracts, because ultimately I pay for my own contract, and therefore there is no cost to the county council. But I am aware I have my mobile phone at home, which is purely on divert, to send it to my private device, which seems bizarre. So is there a way we can look through our contracts and actually trim, I would imagine, a huge amount, because I know I can get unlimited data for £10 a month off Vodafone as a private individual. Surely as a council we could do that. And I think, having looked at some of the figures previously, that ought to save us a lot of money. And I know we do have to change our policy, because I've pushed the council on this previously, and they always say under data protection or some other law. But I think it appears, the LJ can send it to my private phone, the county council, I know they've put some little widget on my phone, but I'm comfortable with the widget. Surely we can go down the same policy and eliminate the need for so many different bits of kit. So it was two simple questions, I think. Oh, Mike.
Yeah, with the red light, we can't answer you. Yes, Alison, please. This wonderful table where people are paying £4,000 a year, according to Attleborough.
I know, it's tax base, isn't it? It's not money. It is number of properties. You're absolutely right. Yeah, and it's not actually number of properties. It's number of Band D equivalents. Yeah. So a Band A is worth, I don't know, 0.6, for example, of 1. So that's what that appendix is.
It's that real problem that as the authority we have to talk in Band D numbers all the time. So anyone in A to H, if they're not in D, don't even get a look in. But that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and on the mobile, so we have just reviewed the contract and made some savings, so that's definitely always in the mix. And I know that they are also looking at changes to sort of Teams and soft phones, that sort of thing. On the policy change, I don't know, but I will take it back and ask the question for you.
We will take it back. You're quite right.
Please do. As a triple hatter, if I had one more piece of technology, I may go crazy. I'd rather have one. Nearly everybody has spoken there, and I know there's a couple that want to have a second go, but I'm conscious if anyone hasn't spoken, is there anything you want to contribute before I just take those additional points? Nope. I'll just do two quick ones for myself then. It kind of follows on from Harry's point about Evolve. Lots of councils are obviously very reliant on reserves at the moment, and I think it's a credit to the team that the budget proposal isn't reliant on reserves, it's reliant on efficiencies. A bit of an enhanced risk there because there's reserves are definite, but the efficiencies less so. At the county council, for all efficiencies, they have to go through a sort of test process to test their robustness. Are they just, pie in the sky, or are they realistic? What process do you go through as a team to test whether those efficiencies and the numbers are realistic?
How long have you got?
Yeah.
No, it is a very long process. We start this sort of almost a few months after the budget is set for the following year. So we will come up with a list of ideas and propositions, and then we will start to test them for exactly that reason. Are they achievable? If they're achievable, how confident are we on the number or the range of the number? And they gradually get whittled down until we get to the final budget, which you'll see in a couple of weeks, where we are relatively confident that they can be achieved. We don't put forward anything unless we're fairly confident we can achieve it. What we can't predict is the change in circumstances that might happen. So it's all based on current circumstances.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I was curious, and I expected that would be the answer, but I wanted to ask. And the other point was, we spoke about the early intervention fund, and I concur with Peter's comments. It's been, tremendously useful for myself. A real credit to the team that processed them. I got the sort of view that there is some money in the budget for next year to carry on the early intervention fund, and I just wondered if you could confirm what that amount was. And also linked to that, we've previously had a separate budget for council tax hardship, and is there a specific amount in the budget for council tax support moving forward?
On the early intervention fund, I don't actually know how much off the top of my head. I'll have to come back to you on that one, sorry.
That's okay.
The council tax hardship, in the current financial year, there's around about 10,000 left from that budget, with ARP prioritising that spend before the end of March. So they've got a campaign at the moment. And then there's an amount in the next 2 financial years. Again, I can't remember the exact amount. I'd have to come back to you on that.
That'd be really useful, thank you. Right, 2 hopefully quick final points, Harry. Quick.
Thank you. Question for Councillor Cow and probably Alison to answer. Thinking about the household support fund, we've talked about that, and that's constrained by central government. The other thing which is constrained us in the past is the disabled facilities grant coming down direct. Can you confirm that we're going to be solely relying on what we get from the government going forward? And if that's the case, then will we also continue to make representations for change in the methodology, which is reflecting the need that we have in Breckland that we're not able to currently meet because of obviously the size of the complexity? Thank you.
So yes, we will continue to lobby. We do that on a regular basis, both as an authority directly and also through the LGA, because it is an essential piece of legislation that we need to try and maintain. It doesn't come to us from government, of course. It comes from the county. It comes from the government via county to us. And the answer to the question is, Helen's looking to say something to me. No, okay, fine. The answer to the question is, I don't know, Harry. So if we can, let you know, we will.
Okay, thank you very much. And last speaker, Roger, please.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just more an observation. Phil, you said earlier on when I asked about the Household Support Fund that I need to perhaps lobby our MPs. That's that's just not going to happen, is it? In all honesty, I've got an MP now whose credibility is shot. There's no way that I can lobby him and ask him to go to government and ask for hardship funding, household support funding, quite frankly. You know, the old saying is, when in a hole, stop digging, and currently he's just about at the iron core of the earth in terms of credibility. And we also have another credibility problem with our MP in the southwest of Norfolk, because whatever your politics, things didn't go exactly well, and people are paying an awful lot more for their mortgages, etc. So in terms of lobbying for help for people who live in Breckland, I just don't think that's going to work. Is there some other way we can do this? Can our leader, you know, through the work that he does, through the district council's network, etc., do this lobbying for us? Because quite frankly, I have an awful lot more faith in Sam Chapman-Allen than I do George Freeman or Liz Truss. And I can't, in all conscience, the people I've been helping, you know, I've got young mums can't afford to put oil in the oil tank to heat the home when they've got a baby. I've got people who literally can't afford the food to do pack up lunches and stuff for the kids to send them to school. I'm trying to help these people, and I just can't go to George Freeman and say, George, can you help with this? It's a credibility problem. We must have a better route as a district council. You know, we are, I believe on the whole, a well-run council, which I think counts for something. But please, can the lobbying be done by Sam, whoever, down at government? I'd make that plea, because I just don't think we're going to get any hearing if you send George Freeman down to government at the moment to say, my constituents suffering hardship and I need more funding. They're going to laugh at him. They're going to laugh at him, Phil. And that's an observation from me. Please, can we do something different and really raise the profile of this issue? Thank you.
I hear exactly what you're saying, Roger. There's two parts to my answer. One is that we are a democracy, and if we don't lobby our MPs, then that's a shame. I don't disagree with your comments and your sentiments necessarily, but that's our individual first point of contact. But I do agree with you, and I do know that Sam does, through the LGA and the DCN, they do lobby central government on a number of issues, and hardship is one of them in its very many guises. So Sam will probably pick this up anyway as a result of this discussion that we're having today, but we will certainly, those of us who see him on a regular basis, make sure that he's aware of those observations that you've made. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we've had a very good debate on that. We do have a recommendation in the pack, and it's a sort of holding recommendation, because as we've heard, there's still a number of things being produced, and the recommendation essentially is that we note the status of the budget thus far in preparation for budget setting in February. Are members happy with the recommendation there? Lovely. Thank you very much, and thank you, Alison and Phil, for fielding those questions and for attending. We'll move on, folks, to the deployable mobile camera policy, and we've had Helen sat waiting patiently. Thank you, Helen. Would you like to introduce this report, please?
Thank you very much, Chairman, and good morning to the ONS Commission. I would like to introduce this report to you all with regard to the introduction and approval of a mobile deployable camera policy. Final decision-making for approval rests with Cabinet and will not need to go to full council, but we would welcome any comments, questions and scrutiny prior to this. Legal and professional advice has been sought and the policy is needed because the use of mobile deployable cameras is something new for Breckland, and the policy will be published so this is overt, open and transparent. It is also necessary for governance and management and ensuring this is implemented and managed in a fair, consistent and proportionate way. This will help reduce the risk of successful challenge and finally complies with good practice and guidance. The Environmental Enforcement Service is very successful, as you know, in dealing with environmental crime, which blights our neighbourhoods and adversely affects our communities. We have a very good track record, but this will add additional and effective methods to detect and deter crime and increase the likelihood of successful enforcement outcomes. I'm going to hand over to Craig Fowler, our Environmental Health and Licensing Manager, who will take you through a few slides. And I know James on my right has also the camera and the signs and that to show you. But as you can appreciate, this is a technical and in-depth policy. So they're here to answer any questions. And I also have Sarah Wolstenholme-Smyre, our Legal Services Manager, to ask with any legal technicalities you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Helen.
Yeah. Morning, everyone. Yeah, I'll take you through some slides. So, why are we doing it then? So I don't know if you can, sorry, next slide, please, if somebody can just click that. So, if approved, we will deploy a number of mobile surveillance cameras. So just to be clear, this is a separate policy to CCTV. Our fixed cameras and our CCTV policy also already exists, so this is separate to that. It's in addition to. So if it's approved, we would deploy those cameras across the district to enable us to increase public safety, deter antisocial behaviour, detect and evidence environmental crime, so things like fly tipping, litter, dog failing and other offences. It creates additional option for us for victims of environmental crime, so increased sort of confidence and safety in those communities. And as I've already said, they are separate to the fixed cameras and they would be placed at strategic locations across the district. Most possibly remote locations, but we can come on to that in a moment. So yeah, next slide, please. So again, cameras will be discreet, they're mobile, they're cost effective and secure. Primarily they could be deployed anywhere, but generally in hotspot activity, and they can be moved where and when required. They would have warning signage for public awareness. James has got some signs on a camera here, just in case you want to see it, so you can see what they look like. Basically, they're positioned so they reduce impact on personal privacy and unnecessary recording. They're encrypted, so they are password protected, so to protect against any data breaches. So in the event that somebody actually did get the camera, they actually took it away, that is encrypted, so they unless they had all of the passwords and all the encryption software, they couldn't actually see anything, so that's protected. They are sensor triggered, so they're not recording all of the time, so they're not unnecessary monitoring. They're not using up battery and randomly just recording everything. They're available, so we can use multiple cameras at a single site, so they could be 2, 3, 4, etc. with different angles. Yeah, next slide, please. So again, they can be using various locations. So just examples there, car parks, dense forest, green spaces, residential areas, etc. We will need a position and a structure to secure and place them on. That is a little bit of a limitation. They could be used on public and private lands, and we would put them at a height to avoid theft or damage and to maximise the visual space. So, next slide, please. So, if the policy is approved, we would have, what we're intending to have is 6 mobile deployable cameras initially, increasing to 10. Usually 2 cameras per location, but there could be more. We would have 4 body-worn cameras, so again, they're officer body-worn cameras, and 2 dash cams, which are fitted to vehicles. So we would obviously, as well as the cameras, we need equipment for installation, so just things for the secure the cameras, ladders, access, all those sort of things. There's no additional costs, so again, beyond that, there's no software, maintenance, subscription, etc. The process is lawful and overt, so it's not covert, it's not hidden. The residents can be supported, so we can combat environmental crime and antisocial behaviour in our communities. So I think that's the end of the slides. And I think we'd welcome any questions or scrutiny that you may have. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. And the full policies in the pack, which is really helpful. And I'm grateful you brought it to scrutiny before it goes to Cabinet and full council. I think that's really useful. I've got Terry first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Nice to see you here, James. Could I take this opportunity to thank you for the work you've done in my ward. It's been fantastic. My comment really, I'm in support of this, so let that be clear. My comment is there are some people who are less supportive of this. I know you said that you're going to put them at the cameras at a height where they won't be disturbed. I am a little concerned it might prompt a wave of vandalism on the cameras. Do you anticipate this?
Yeah, I mean that's always a possibility. Unfortunately, we do have to put signs there for so they are overt, so it's not so people are a little bit warned, but they will be secure. The cameras are not really high value. We've looked at various options, so that there are quite expensive high value cameras. So I'm not saying obviously we don't want people to steal them. They are of lower value. They will be securely secured as much as we can. We'll put them in locations. I don't know if James has any other comments on that, but we've considered that, and I think my personal view is there is a risk of that. There's an option of just do nothing in the event that somebody might vandalise it, but I think my personal view is we should try and we should look at that, and we will see if that is an issue or not. But the option is, they may get vandalised, they may get stolen, and we just do nothing, which I personally don't think is the best option.
I agree. Thank you.
Did you mention you had one of the cameras there? You just hold it up for members to see, just so we can get an idea. Okay, good.
Morning all. I'm happy to obviously explain a little bit more about this hardware. The cameras, essentially wildlife cameras. A lot of them use. I certainly have one. I use it for monitoring hedgehogs in the garden for my little boy. So, but these are, as Craig has mentioned, very cost effective. We worked it out. Essentially, it's one fixed penalty. We'll pay for one. So it's very straightforward. As Craig said, no software involved, no Wi-Fi needed. In terms of this hardware, it's very easy to secure onto various structures. Likewise, although we are actively seeking an overt procedure with it, it doesn't mean we have to put a spotlight on it. It can be amongst the trees, vegetation, as long as the signage is present and high vis. It's a lot bigger than our existing signage. We've got sort of A5 for our existing CCTV. That's almost A3. So I'd like to think, just to echo what you're saying, is that in addition, when we've got 2 or 3 cameras, we'll likely be covering the scope of one camera with the second, so we'll be able to capture what happens to the camera as well, if that makes sense. But likewise, we won't be positioning the cameras in vast spaces because we want to bear in mind privacy, unnecessary filming, and it will be focused on where the problem sites are primarily, if that helps.
That's really useful. Thank you for that. Fabian, next, please.
Really, just to follow on from Terry's point, we've got several of them we use for security. There is one little flaw, and I found out to me an expense is you just take the SIM card out and you've solved the problem. But we do have the advantage that, should we say, people are going to have to follow us a bit like we become Harry Callahan and Do They Feel Lucky Punk, that if we put more of those signs about, they've always got the risk that, okay, we've only got 4 cameras or whatever we use, but if we use 20 sites with those signs up, everyone's always got the risk, is that camera there? So we're not going to move the problem to the next unmanned site. So actually, if you're moving the cameras around, leave those signs there, because my ward's blighted by fly tipping, and you've done some fantastic jobs as prosecutions, and I want it. The only thing else I would say might be a benefit to you is now they're very cheap. And with a SIM card, which has just been alluded for £10 a month, you can have that camera up and with the phone, and it's on a battery, and you can still move and record those, and you can actually see what you're doing, and they're very effective. And you get the right sort of camera for the money. You can even tell someone what you're doing, and we've got you, and really make them jump.
Thank you, Fabian. Robert, next, please. Robert.
Thank you, Chairman. Question, do these cameras have night vision, and is that an infrared-based one, so you're not aware of the illumination?
Yes. Yes, night vision is included. This strange setup at the top is essentially light adjusting, so sunrise, sunset, etc., so that it's not being overexposed with light. It can adapt through various sensors on there as well.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Gordon, next, please.
Thank you. Like Fabian, I use similar cameras, and I find them very effective. I think, yes, all I can say is about time, and I'm not being critical when I say that. I think this is something that we should have. I do know that at least 2 of my villages have already applied to be sites for the cameras, so I'm pretty sure they'll be taken up. I think my only criticism is we haven't got enough, but I'll accept that that will take time to come along. Well done for getting it there. And I mean, this actually puts James in a lay-by on the A1067 for a fortnight. So, and I'm very pleased to have him there.
Thank you, Gordon. Linda, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to check how this falls within the Regulation of Investigating Powers Act, because I remember back in the day, if we were putting a camera up, say, on a fly tip, you had to apply for a RIPA licence. So can you just explain how this sits with that?
Because we're not filming in secret, RIPA doesn't apply.
Very good question. Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think this is an excellent idea. I believe before my time there were mobile cameras which parish councils could request. I as understand the numbers are small, so are you identifying hotspots for fly tipping basically to put them up first? Or, because Gordon said something about parish councils have already applied for them, well, you're going to be inundated with numbers, and we're not going to be able to support those councils. The SNAP meetings I attend across Breckland, every parish council is getting antisocial behaviour, damage to bus shelters, flower boxes and the like, and we're not going to be able to do that. Have we investigated the fact of looking for funding from government? I believe there were some packages put out by government. Now, whether they've been delivered or they've been suspended, I don't know. But personally, I would have thought we ought to go wholesale on this, try and get that government funding, and blitz the area, blitz our district, and have numbers available for parish councils to request a location.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the question. I think we have considered about the demand for them. So what we would do as officers, we would categorise sort of the circumstances as high, medium, and low. So it's not a case of he who shouts or she who shouts loudest. We would categorise them in that order. I take the point. I think this is the policy. I think this is the first step. So again, I think this was initially seen as a trial. So again, if we get the 10, obviously there is also resource of officer time and actually installing and taking them away and downloading. So it's not just a case of, just getting the camera. There is quite a lot of officer resource. So I think yes, we have considered demand. I think we would do this as a first step. We would then look at that. And I think we should just as a stepped approach, and then we could look at a bigger thing sort of later.
Yes,
I understand that as well, and that's brilliant. The costs as well, if we're not going to get funding from government, would the costs on fines imposed on fly tipping convictions, would that cover the cost? Is that those fines being imposed at the moment, is that only just covering the clearing up of the fly tipping, or will that help to cover some extra cameras as well? And the running costs of your staff looking after them?
Okay, so I mean, we have got a very good track record. So basically about 50% of that are reported to us result in either a fixed penalty or a written warning. Obviously, some people might say, well, 50% isn't that high. Obviously, we need something. So if something's in a remote location, I don't know, it's a mattress, it's a cupboard. Unless there's a witness or there is actually a name of the person, it is very difficult to bring them to a successful outcome. So we have got a good track record. I think this will help us, won't it? It will help us, obviously, to increase that likelihood, and that will increase the fixed penalty notice. But in regard to the income, basically it's forecasted for next year. We're forecasting about £12,500 of fixed penalty notice income, which is reinvested back into the service. And hopefully, that if cameras disappear, we need to grow additional cameras. It's reinvested and ring-fenced back into that enforcement function. So if that answered the question, hopefully it did answer it.
Yes, thank you for that. It does. Yeah, and there's one other question, if you don't mind, Chairman. The purchasing of the cameras from a company, is that a company you purchase from? Have you inquired with them? Because I know some companies who sell these cameras do give out free information, educational information for us to go and put it into schools and educate on littering and fly tipping. I just wondered if that's an option you could get from the supplier.
Thank you for the question. I think, so certainly in terms of the hardware, so in particular this unit here is an Essex-based company. They are manufactured in Essex, all parts and pieces UK manufactured as well. In terms of information, I mean, certainly schools is something that we're looking at going forward in terms of engaging with our communities, and we're all quite keen on something like that going forward. Certainly education in the community is something that we've focused on very hardly over the last 18 months particularly, which I think certainly last year's 20% reduction in fly tipping I think has significantly helped that. But schools is on the next step, certainly, so we're hoping to juggle nice and evenly in terms of education and enforcement.
Okay, thank you. William, next, please.
Fairly straightforward question. If the signs are put up by us, Breckland, and then a parish council chose to invest in its own piece of kit, could they look at that and see, if an offence happened in, say, my village in the village hall, and we gave you the video, would that be legally enforceable by you still? I was just thinking, if we've only got 10 cameras but parishes chose to buy them, I don't think they're that expensive, we could multiply up the number of cameras exponentially. And indeed, we could get our own team to look at the evidence and then, a bit like dash cams, show you, as we would with the police, for you to take action. Sorry, I've turned off.
Yeah, certainly, we've got the Data Protection Act where we can share legitimately information or evidence of an offence. Take fly tipping, it is a criminal offence. It can be enforced by police and can result in imprisonment. So it is an easy win in terms of how we can share the evidence. In terms of localised cameras, it would be no different if it was a private landowner with his own CCTV set up. Essentially your parishes and towns look after their land and have contractors' expenses to pay for, and if the issues are occurring there, it would be no different. Obviously, we're the enforcing agent in terms of environmental crime. It would be as good as any other piece of evidence that's come from a member of the public.
So if that helps.
Good suggestion. Last speaker is Paul, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think my question's been answered. The question was if a parish council would like to purchase one of these cameras, would it be possible for you to oversee any of the information that the camera does? But I think that's already been answered. So I've got 2 parish councils which would be interested straight away, but I don't know. The problem is once you open this up, are we opening up a can of worms? You get 54 parishes all want a camera, and then suddenly you're sort of overwhelmed by cameras.
Yeah, I think in answer to the question, in principle, yes, we could. I suppose the only, as you said, my only concern is we only have so much officer resource, so we would do that and we would accept it. But obviously, yeah, we've only got James and one other, so we would have to look at that. And I suppose, yeah, that could be a future discussion, couldn't it? Because that you could say, well, yeah, that might result in the increase of income, which could self-fund. So if it's self-funded, that answers the problem. Well, provides a solution, should I say? But I think the only limitation to that is yes, we could, but it is officer resources of doing all of that and not enforcement work, which is quite resource intensive.
But ultimately, we want to use this as a deterrent as well. So in effect, we want to see fly tipping and environmental crime reduced. So we're not looking to make huge incomes. We actually don't want to be able to fine people because we don't want it there in the first place.
Okay.
I think Sarah would also, just on the data protection bit, sorry, just wants to mention something about sharing of data from parishes.
Yeah. I think we'd have to look at who's responsible for the actual data that's being captured by the camera. Because obviously if it counts as the parish being the data controller, then they would have to comply with their own data protection policy, maybe even have a camera policy. So I think, yes, we can, but we just I need to be able to square it off in terms of data protection.
Yeah, Fabian?
Just quickly, just to take it on another point, rather than the camera, I know we've all got limited finances, but if councils were willing to pay for those signs, because the signs going to be, now they know they've got the cameras, everyone's got that risk of where the cameras actually are. And so I could think of my parishes would probably be more likely to say, can we have a few of those signs or make a donation towards them, and then you move the camera as appropriate rather than doing the camera. It'd probably be just as effective.
Okay, that's noted. Gordon?
Just going to say we have a solicitor here, so I can be proved wrong. I understand that parish councils, and certainly the larger ones, would have the capacity, can in fact operate their own cameras. They can in fact enforce in the same way that we do with fixed penalties because they're statutory bodies of a similar type to us.
Can I come back to you on that one? I'm not sure, to be honest, because obviously they're not the enforcing agency. I know definitely the district council are for environmental crime. I'd have to investigate the parish situation.
It'd be useful if you could circulate that to the committee when you find out. So our recommendation in the report, yes, Peter?
Just what Helen Councillor Kramer was saying, prevention, which is brilliant. That's what I was saying about education material. And I think Fabian just mentioned it. Did he say about leaving the signs up? Was that going to be legal to leave the signs up so we've got more signage? Basically, even if the camera's not there, because signs do work. Because I went to Derby on Saturday and I went to this road where I normally park because I won't pay parking. And it was empty. And I thought there's something wrong here. And then some chap come along and said, oh no, this is now a zone for residents parking only. You'll get a 30 quid fine. There's hardly any signs. So I was saved, but that sign frightened me off, you know. And I believe as well when, it's not quite straightforward, when there's evidence goes forward for prosecution from CCTV, I think it is the CPS has the final decision and follows up what has been processed and how it's been gathered and that sort of thing. So that's a big thing, you know, where so they are basically the public is protected like that.
Thank you. Yes, just I know it was mentioned before. So with the signage, so I've acquired enough signage to leave in the associated hotspots, because the blessing with these is that they can go up and come down as often and as frequently as we like. Likewise, we're in a position to then return the cameras to the same hotspot a few weeks later if we're seeing a resurge in incidents, for example, or quite simply to maintain the drop in incidents if that matters. In terms of CPS, I mean, you're right. You know, when we take things to court, they will be the judge essentially to see whether it has the right merit. You know, likewise, we've got the authority to do so and deal with things ourselves, fixed penalty notice, for example. You know, the cameras and any footage, if we're not able to identify those individuals, you know, we'll put them on our public surveillance person of interest webpage, which has recently been released. So there's options going forward, but certainly in prosecution, yes, that would be something for them to consider.
Thank you. David.
Yeah, just a quick one, Chairman. Could you possibly circulate the source of those cameras to members of the Commission? Because if I wanted to go back to Swaffham Town Council, and I do know that you've got Swaffham on the front of this, which obviously is a sign of our need for these cameras around Swaffham. If the parish councils wanted to do something, obviously it would be convenient to have the same cameras, etc. So if you could circulate the source, that would be very useful. Thank you.
Lovely. Does anybody want to make any changes to the policy as written, or are we happy to adopt or recommend to Cabinet essentially en bloc? Yeah. Lovely, thank you. And I'm very conscious that this is a new tool in our kit. Would you be happy to come back at a later date and update us on how you've been getting on? I think that'd be really useful for the Commission to see how it's been going and what we've learned.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, we've that recommendation approved. We'll move on to item 10, please. Does anybody have any outside body feedback? David?
Thank you, Chairman. This is something that's linked into the conversation about hardship and the Household Support Fund. I would just like to remind members of the existence of the Hammonds Educational Trust, which I have the pleasure of chairing, and our ability to award grants to young people throughout Breckland under the age of 21. We have a fairly broad brush in the definition of educational, in the sense it could be something physical, it could be university fees, it could be books, it could be a variety of things. And we are looking, obviously, because it's called the Hammond Trust, everybody thinks it's centred in Swaffham. Yes, it is, but the programme is Breckland-wide. And we have supported individuals and we have given grants to schools. We gave a grant, for example, to Attleborough to help with pupils in the Attleborough school who were doing the Duke of Edinburgh Award, and they were unable to afford the cost of going on the necessary trips, etc., for that award. So I'd just like to remind members about that. You can go to the Hammonds Educational Charity website and have a look at that. And we meet three or four times a year to look at grants as well as other things. And I think, yes, we are seeing an increased number of applications from families who are unable to support their children educationally, as I said. And we also cover apprenticeships as well, by the way. So just a reminder that that charity is out there. So please do make use of it if you feel you have a family that is in need of that sort of support. Thank you.
That's really useful, David. Thank you. Ruth, could we make a note to send for Dem Services to send something to all members about that? I think that'd be really useful. Robert was next, I saw.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The good news from Breckland Museums is the successful lottery bid for £198,000 for the centenary of Ancient House Museum. This will hugely increase the interpretation for our Sikh or visitors from the Punjab, and the funding will run for 2 years, which will then also coincide with the 100th anniversary of the death of Prince Frederick. The Joint Museums Committee meets tomorrow, as does the Record Committee, and I'll report back further on that.
Thank you. Very positive news from Ancient House. Well done to them and everyone involved. Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just confirmation on the AB conference. Everyone has the right to play. The launch date has now been confirmed. It's Friday the 23rd of February at 10 a.m. at Barnum Broom Hotel. All parish and town clerks should have received an invitation for councillors to attend this launch for the inclusion playground equipment, basically. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to item 11, scrutiny call-ins. There are none. Item 12, councillor call for action. There are none. Item 13, the work programme. That's been republished this morning. There's been a couple of updates. The eagle-eyed amongst you will note that we were going to be having Tristan Ashby at the March meeting, but he can't make that now. So grateful that Alison Webb has stepped in and she'll be attending the March meeting for her cabinet member portfolio update. And we've also got UK Power Networks booked for March, and both the Citizens Advice Bureau Norfolk and the Citizens Advice Diss and Thetford booked for March. So it should be quite an interesting meeting in March. And then you'll see the other bits that are mapped out for the next two meetings. Any comments or observations about the work programme? Harry, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Quick question, which I'm sure Councillor Cam will be able to answer, possibly on behalf of Tristan Ashby, and possibly the Chairman, just for clarity, that the Inspiring Communities programme, the report, will be coming to the March Scrutiny Committee, I'm assuming, after it's been to Cabinet. Am I correct in that?
Theoretically, that's the case, but I think the intention was that Tristan would actually present it, but we'll get clarification on that for you.
Just coming back quickly on that, because obviously, irrespective of the funding sources, the overall budget financial package 22nd of Feb will obviously encompass Inspiring Communities, and I know that obviously we're all very supportive of that, but it's doing all those things in tandem rather than sort of after the event. So I'm just trying to align those magic circles. Thank you.
Thank you. Roger?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Coming back to what I was saying earlier on about household support fund and generally helping vulnerable residents with the cost of living, just wonder if you think there's any merit in us forming a small task and finish group, actually, because I'm thinking household support fund is coming to an end in March. We have the early intervention fund. We have the council tax support fund. And it would be nice to have a group that actually pulls all that together, look at detail of how many people we've actually helped, what funds are still available. Do we think that they are those funds are the best way of helping, and pulling that together with all that information to report back here and actually use it as a positive tool to help somebody like Sam to go to government and lobby on our behalf and say, this is the definitive report on what we have done as Breckland Council, and there is this, we know there is this ongoing need, and we're going to need more resources as a result of it. I don't think this should be a political football, but what I think, it should be this cross-party to see whether we can pull all that information together. We may need to get one or two officers in and sort of ask for information that could feed into that and produce a report specifically around that could report to the overview and scrutiny. I just wonder whether you think there's any merit in that. I certainly do. I think that would be a useful tool, but I'd be interested to know what other members think.
Yep. Well, I'm here to serve. What's the view of the Commission? Is that something you feel you would welcome?
I think if we're going to speak to the leader to add this to his many busy schedules, he probably will have those figures at hand anyway. He's only got to speak to individual officers. That will save officer time if we did have a works group together. I think he would be aware of that, and I'm sure if he agrees to go and lobby on our behalf, because that's not necessary. We have, like Councillor Cowan said, we have got the MPs, regardless of the personal, whatever you think of an MP, they will do your job. They will do the job. You go to it, they will go and do what you've asked of them. So
okay.
I think.
Rob, can you remind me of the process for a task and finish group? Purely because I can't remember.
Unfortunately, I've just opened to the right page of the Constitution.
I saw it on there.
The Every Scrutiny Commission can run 8 task and finish groups in the course of a year. I don't believe we've got one live at the moment, so certainly that ability is there to set up a new task and finish group. If you decide to set up a task and finish group, it can comprise up to 10 members. None of those 10 members can be members of the Cabinet. It's important that the chairman of the task and finish group is a member of the commission, but I think membership can be drawn from a wider group than just the commission. So, if you chose to, chairman, if the committee resolved to, then you're perfectly entitled to set up a task and finish group, and you would elect a chairman, essentially.
Okay, well, we'll take that away as an action, Roger, and then we'll send out some more details and see who wants to be involved. Okay, Peter?
We did, Roger and I did sit on our task and finish group for the Serco contracts, and they work very, very well.
Yeah, I mean, my experience of them is they're actually been very
You have a criteria to work to, but that's what we did.
Chair, thank you for indulging me. I think David has just pointed out to me, I think what that group can actually do, he's mentioned the Hammonds Trust. I think actually as a ward representative it would be useful if we can actually, as part of that task and finish group, pull together some of the other funds that are maybe available out there and sources of funding. So, because I think that would be important then to give all that information to members. I'm sure that the leader he can ask any officer and get specific figures, but I think in terms of pulling it all together and where is there other sources of funding available and put all that together as a piece of work to show what the charity sector is doing and maybe parish and town councils may be doing in this regard as well. I just think that may be a useful exercise. I'm not keen on having committees and meetings for sake of it, but I think a small dedicated group of people, particularly councillors who've done a lot of welfare referrals, you know, and been involved in that, in helping those residents, I think that would be of benefit and probably take all the politics out of it, and let's get around a table and look at what we've done well, and what we think we probably need going forward, I would suggest.
Okay, I'm just checking on process there, Roger. So what we need to do is to, if we're going to do it, to resolve as a commission that we want to establish a task and finish group. And I think we'd bring it back to the next meeting with an idea of membership and terms of reference. I think that's what we need to be doing. So can I have a show of hands from members that you're in agreement to establish the task and finish group? Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Those against? Those abstaining? Thank you very much. That's approved, and we'll come back at the March meeting with the necessary to take it forward. Thank you very much. Item 14 then, next meeting, to note that the next meeting is on the 14th of March. There being no further business, thank you very much for attending. This meeting is closed.